Hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving. I'm glad that everybody has made it home safely, and I hope that you have recovered some from your holidays. It's a funny thing. We take holidays and vacations, and then we have to go back to real life to recover from all of those things. But we're glad that you're here. I know if your Thanksgiving or your holiday was a lot like ours, it was busy, it was hectic, it was fast, and it always seems like there's so much to do and never enough time to do it. I think that's pretty normal. And you know, I was noticing, and I guess we all kind of noticed this, and I've noticed this growing up, that it seems like when you have these family gatherings or you do things together as a family, that there are always people, usually one that kind of takes the lead and does all of the labor, does all the work, and just kind of goes in the kitchen and just that seems to be their thing, that they just get in there and they're able to execute that and do it precisely, and you know, and a lot of times in our families, a lot of people would kind of pitch in and help as much as they can, but there's always that one person that takes the lead and takes control of the whole situation. And you know, often that person, as much work as they do, they wouldn't really have it any other way. You know, maybe that person's you, I don't know, but I mean, you wouldn't have it any other way, that's the way things are, and you're going to make sure things are done a certain way. And you know, they may complain a little bit about all of the work, you know, maybe, you know, not much, but that's the way things are in their world, that they're going to be that person who takes control and does everything that needs to be done, right? And really, if you try to take that place, you know, I mean, if they say, oh, there's so much work to do, and you're like, oh, let me help, let me take that place, what usually happens, you know? It doesn't always end very well most of the time, right? Usually you get in trouble for trying to nose in on what they're doing because they're committed to that and they're devoted to that, you know, or you know, maybe you're that person who steals a slice of lemon pie before the meringue cures, and you know, your life is being threatened at that moment, you know, and you're thinking, I just sacrificed everything for a slice of lemon pie. But you know, that whole idea of having that one person that is committed to the serving, committed to the work, committed to doing the work. And I would say that most of the time, they are not doing that out of just obligation, although there are some necessary things to be done. They're not just doing that out of obligation. Somebody has to do it. But most of the time, that family member, whomever it is doing it out of not just a necessity, but out of love and out of devotion, right? That they have love, they have devotion, they know it needs to be done, and that's their way of expressing it. That is how they love their family, by committing themselves to doing that. And they're going to do it, even if they may complain a little bit about it. They're going to do it, but they're going to do it out of love and out of devotion. And so some thoughts this morning as we begin our lesson. When does obligation cease to be out of love and devotion? When does obligation actually take us away from that which we love and we're devoted to? When does obligation become an obstacle instead of something that is an expression of love for people? And so here's a phrase I want us to think about as we go through this lesson. We're going to begin here, we're going to end here, and hopefully this will be beneficial to you. There will always be some things demanding our time. I think we can all agree about that. There will always be things demanding our time, but there will not always but our time with somebody is limited. So we're not always going to have time with people. But there will always be things, right? There's always going to be something going on. There's always going to be an emergency. There's always going to be something work-related, some work-related issue. There is always going to be something, somebody out there demanding our time, something demanding our time. That will always be the case, and it will consume our time. right? And the thing is if we're not careful, we're going to allow whatever that is, that obligation, I'm putting that in air quotes, because I think that's where we think, what we think about when we think about these things. These are obligations. I have to do these things. These are most important. These are things that I have to do. But at what point does that obligation take us away from the things we should be doing and the people we should be doing it with? Because someday we're going to wake up after putting out all the fires and chasing every emergency and responding to every demand and responding to every call, that someday we're going to wake up and find that the thing that was necessary was not done, and the thing that we considered necessary was not necessary. And so I want us to be mindful of this as we read through the account of Martha and Mary in Luke chapter 10. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open to Luke chapter 10. I'm going to spend a brief time in John chapter 11, but I'll just read through that or kind of survey that for you, so you don't have to turn there if you don't want to. But John chapter 11 is where we're introduced, or we are given a little more detail about this family, Martha and Mary and their brother Lazarus. And we know that from that passage, from that gospel, that Lazarus is sick and then he eventually dies. And we also know that from that section of Scripture that Jesus had this unique and close relationship to this family, Martha and Mary and Lazarus, that is special. So this family from Bethany holds a special place in Jesus' heart. And they're not related as far as we know. I mean, the Scriptures don't tell us that there is any kind of distant connection at all, per se, but they're like family. They're close. And Jesus loves this family, and they love Jesus, and there's a close connection here. And when Lazarus dies, it's Martha. And I think this is important to see, because in Luke's account, we have a little different view of Martha. But in John's account, it's Martha who runs out to meet Jesus as he is coming to Bethany after the death of Lazarus. And it is Martha who speaks the words to Jesus that she knows, that I know, that he will rise in the resurrection on the last day, speaking of her brother Lazarus. So we get this feeling about Martha that she is a very devoted, very righteous person, that she is committed to her faith and her belief in Jesus as the Messiah. So both Martha and Mary and Lazarus, this is a family of great faith. That both of these women are women of great faith. They're not just disciples, okay? They're not just going through the motions. They're not just, following Jesus from a distance, but they're closely connected to Jesus and listening to him, especially while he is ministering on earth. So now in Luke's gospel account, we have the record of another encounter that Jesus has, or I should say Martha and Mary have with Jesus, that's a little bit different. But we have another account. Lazarus is not mentioned in this section of Scripture. But starting in verse 38, it says, "Now as they were traveling along, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home." So Luke kind of introduces Martha as a woman named Martha, as if we don't really know who Martha is, or something of that nature. Maybe his readers didn't know. But this is a special person. And we need to recognize that she is a special person. And we also need to acknowledge that in Luke's gospel in chapter 10, we have this overarching theme that about heavenly things, kingdom things that have been hidden. They have been hidden from the wise and the intelligent, and they have been revealed to the humble, to the infants. And Martha and Mary are certainly these women who are in that category of the infant, that are recipients of Jesus' teachings and his word. And so we need to recognize them that way. And they're not of the class of the Pharisee or the rabbi or the lawyer that has the wisdom and the intelligence that seems to be clouding their view of Jesus. So I think it's safe to say that these women, especially most likely at least one of them was a widow. We kind of get that vibe. We don't really know, but I kind of feel like Martha has that about her. So that's how I see her. I also feel that Mary may be the younger sister and is living in her home, Martha's home. And so those are kind of sets the stage a little bit for the family dynamics of how this story is going to unfold. So in verse 39, excuse me, where am I at here? I don't know where missed my slide. I'm sorry. Verse 39, it says, and she, that is Martha, had a sister, and her name was Mary, or she was called Mary, who was also seated at the Lord's feet and was listening to his words. So we have these two sisters. Martha is obviously seems to be the one who owns the home and is being the one who is hospitable to Jesus, brings him in. But if you remember, as you're following through the Gospels, Jesus was seldom ever alone. He was often with other people. There were often at least the 12 that were with Jesus. We don't know, and Luke doesn't tell us whether the 12 were also invited in. All we know is that Jesus was. But we have to be mindful that maybe Jesus came with others. And so that helps us understand the pressure that Martha is going to be under for this act of hospitality, right? But then we have Mary, who is sitting at Jesus' feet and listening to him. And to sit at somebody's feet, that phrase may not mean a lot to us today. It may just kind of give us the incentive that there's a connection there or some kind of a friendship there. But to these people, sitting at somebody's feet is to learn from them. It's as if this one speaking is a rabbi, and you're going to sit at their feet and you're going to learn from them. And that seems to be where Mary is, that she wants to sit at the feet of the rabbi. She wants to sit at the feet of the teacher and listen and learn. I cannot imagine this opportunity. I cannot wrap my head around how to even think about this opportunity to literally sit at the feet of Jesus at a house, in a home, in your home, and listen to him teach and ask him questions and just sit there and learn. This whole scene shocks me. It surprises me. It takes me out of my reality that I presently live in and puts me in a reality where I could literally sit at Jesus' feet, and I have a hard time reconciling this opportunity. I don't understand it. I don't know how it would feel. I can only imagine what it would be like to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to him speak. And Mary has taken advantage of this unique opportunity. And of course, as readers, we know what is coming for Jesus. We know that Jesus is headed to the cross. We know that he will be killed. And so we know that this time that they have with Jesus in the flesh as he is ministering to people is limited. And we know that Mary has made this choice to sit and listen to Jesus teach. In verse 40, but Martha was distracted with all of her preparations, and she came up to Jesus as he's speaking, and Mary is sitting at his feet. And so Martha comes up to Jesus and says, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do the serving by myself? Then tell her to help me." All right, so that's kind of the struggle, the tension, and then again, I feel like the tension is even more so if you think about the possibility that Jesus was probably bringing others. We don't know, then again, that's speculation, but there's tension. There's work, there's preparation, there's probably a meal that needs to be prepared for. She's hosting Jesus in her home, the great teacher, the rabbi. Things need to be done, and her sister doesn't seem to be helping, and she feels the pressure, and she makes this request of Jesus. You know, I was thinking about this from maybe our perspective, and maybe you're thinking about Thanksgiving, and we talked about that a lot this morning, but preparing that meal for Thanksgiving, and everybody's working hard, and you're one of those who's in the kitchen, and you're diligent, and you're taking point for Thanksgiving, and you're really making sure everything gets done, and somebody, a family member, comes in the door a little late, nothing's done yet, you're only half done with the meal, and everyone who is helping you stops what they're doing and runs over into the living room and sits with them and talks with them, and you're stuck in the kitchen, and you're just thinking, this is not good, right? How is this ever going to get done? If nobody's going to be helping me, I want to be in the kitchen, or I want to be in the living room rather, but I can't because I've got work to do. And you can kind of get the impression of how stressful that would be. And you can almost imagine that person running into the living room and saying, hey, the meal's not done yet. You guys need to come back in here and help me, and then we'll visit later. So we get this impression of how Martha may have felt, knowing that work needed to be done, and her sister, probably the only one to help her, is not taking on her responsibility. And I think it's interesting. Then again, as I'm reading through this, it's interesting to think about Martha addressing Jesus with this. It's not that she goes to Mary and says, hey, Mary, you need to come and help me, but directs it to Jesus and kind of rebukes him. Don't you know? Can't you see? Don't you understand what's going on? Don't you know there's work to be done, right? Tell her, Jesus, to come and help me. That she is directing this rebuke in the direction of Jesus. But Jesus doesn't take this rebuke as an offense. At least it doesn't seem. He's not offended, as far as we can tell, but he takes this opportunity to teach. He takes this opportunity to teach this family. These two sisters living in this home, hospitable, righteous women of faith who have committed themselves to Jesus and following him. He takes the opportunity to teach this loving family. And then in verse 41, he says, but the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. Then again, I can't help but just try to imagine how this would be, but only Jesus could say this to a woman who is angry, right? I mean, nobody else would have this ability. Only Jesus could say this to a woman who has just run out of the kitchen, who has all this work to do, has rebuked him, and then he turns around and just tells her, Martha, you're so distracted. I mean, don't do this at home, folks. I mean, that's the message there. But Jesus takes this opportunity to teach Martha. As he's teaching Mary, obviously, but Martha needs a lesson also about priorities and that which is necessary and that which is important, and finding opportunity to sit with those who will not always be there with you. And so Jesus tells her that she is anxious, that she is distracted. And it wasn't so much the work, I mean, we kind of focused on the work, that she's just trying to get all the work done. And I don't know if it was so much the work. Jesus doesn't really rebuke her for that and say, you shouldn't have been doing it anyway. But he kind of speaks to her on the level of how she feels about the work, how she is anxious, how she is distracted by these many things, how she has allowed the work to take her away from other things. And I think that's where the important part of the story comes from. Obviously, there are things that need to be done. Obviously, there are obligations. Obviously, there are preparations that have to be taken care of. Martha's going to be the one to do it. That seems to be her character. It is her home. She is the one hosting. She's going to make sure it's going to be done. But Jesus speaks about how anxious she is, how distracted she is. But I think it goes beyond the work, doesn't it? And it goes into the very thought of the work. And that's where the rubber hits the road for us. Just the thought, just the weightiness of all that seems important and needs to be done, that alone will cause us to be anxious and distracted. That alone, and you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not so much the work, but sometimes just the thought of the work. You can be at home with your family and not be at home with your family because of the weightiness and the anxiety and the distraction of just knowing that there's work that needs to be done. I've been there. I'm sure you have been there. But what good is that, really? I mean, how much work have you ever gotten done by worrying about the work that needs to be done? I mean, how much work have you accomplished by being anxious about the work that needs to be accomplished? None, right? Not a single bit. But how much time have you robbed from the people in whom you love, being anxious and distracted about the work that needs to be done? How much time have you taken away from your spiritual relationship with God? Your learning from Jesus, your studying and taking the time to develop and cultivate that relationship. How much time has been robbed from that? Just from the anxiety and the worry about the work that needs to be done. A lot, right? If we're honest with ourselves, a lot. And that's where we come into Martha's situation. In verse 42, Jesus says this. He says, but only one thing is necessary. Now, Martha's thinking, oh, no. There's lots of things that are necessary. Let me tell you about what's necessary. We've got preparation. We've got work to do. That's what's necessary. And Jesus says, no, there's one thing that is necessary. One thing that is most important. One thing that takes precedent over all other things. And Mary has chosen the good part. She has made that choice, which shall not be taken away from her. In that moment, in that home, in that village in Bethany, the one thing that was necessary was to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen and learn. That was what was necessary. If you remember Deuteronomy 8, as God is communicating to the people of Israel and preparing them for being his covenant people. And it says in Deuteronomy 8, verses 2 and 3, that you shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 days, that he might humble you and test you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you, and he let you be hungry, and then he fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live on bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. You see, in that moment, feasting on the words of Jesus was the necessary thing. To hear the words of God in the flesh was the necessary thing. And Martha's anxiety about the needed preparation for her guest or guests, that was keeping her from sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening and consuming the bread, the word of Jesus. That just the anxiety alone was keeping her and distracting her from that which is necessary. I think the devil's greatest tool against the church today is anxiety and distraction. I think that's his greatest tool. I think he loves it. I think he uses it and he leverages it and he tries to get us so anxious and so distracted and so worried that we're so consumed by that. When you wake up in the morning, that's what's on your mind. When you go to bed at night, that's what's on your mind. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You cannot get that out of your mind, and it's consuming you, and it's taking you away from not only your loved ones, but from loving others and loving God, because you're not consuming the food that he is providing for you. And I think that is the devil's greatest tool. He wants you to be busy. We like to think about being busy and having lots to do. And I think the devil uses that to his advantage and to our disadvantage. Now, you may have seen this acronym. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I would share it anyhow. But you may have seen this acronym about being busy, right? It's being under Satan's yoke. And then again, there's times when we're busy and it's not the end of the world. I'm not saying this is always the case, But I am saying that there are many, many, many things in life that will take us away from that which is necessary if we allow that to happen. And I think there's a lot of truth to this acronym in the sense that Satan is going to use that to keep us and to yoke us and to keep us from doing the things that are important. And I don't even think that you have to be doing the thing. Then again, it's not about just doing the thing. The thing will always be there, but it is thinking about doing the thing. Just the thought of it consumes us and will eat us on the inside out. It will consume us, just the thought of something needing to be done. That alone can take you away from learning from Jesus, right? Because if you're too busy, folks, if you're too busy to develop meaningful relationships with the members of the church, if you're too busy to develop meaningful relationships with the members of the church, you have not chosen the good part. You have not chosen the good part. If you are too busy to serve the needs of the church, the needs of your neighbor, you have not chosen the good part. If your mind is clouded with things, and I know a lot of times that happens, and I have to catch myself a lot of times to say, stop. You just stop worrying about things that are not worth worrying about. Stop thinking about things that are not worth thinking about. Stop being anxious about things that haven't even happened yet. Stop allowing those things to cloud your mind, because if your mind is clouded with these things and you're worried and you're distracted by the many things, there is a good chance that right now you are being robbed of the things that are necessary, right? Folks, this right here, this time that we have together right here, a time that the Lord has set aside from us, can be wasted. It can be completely wasted if our mind is not here, if our heart is not here, if we're so busy just thinking about being busy, we can be robbed from this special time that we have with one another. I know every Sunday I remind you and I encourage you to put away the worldly cares and to focus on God, to focus on worship. And I remind you that not just for you, but it's for me too, that I need to be reminded of that. I need to mentally disconnect and mentally in mind and heart come together and recognize that this is special. This is unique. This is a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to come together as God's people before the Creator God and worship Him. And if we're not careful, we will let the world distract us of that and take us away from that. And we will allow anxiety to rob us of that which is necessary. So a couple of thoughts as we kind of conclude this. I know this is a lesson that I have thought about for many years. I was kind of hesitant. I didn't know if I was going to mention this or not, but several years ago when we lived in Laurel, Maryland, there was a preacher there, and he taught on this lesson. At the time, we were busy, we were working all the time, and it just seemed like hour after hour after hour there was something to do. And for some reason, this short lesson that he taught on Martha and Mary, I kept the tape. That's how long ago it was, all right? I have the tape. I don't know where it's been destroyed now because I've worn it out. Even if you could find a tape player that would play it, I don't know if it would play, but I kept the tape and I listened to it over and over, and it was such a simple lesson, but it made me really stop and question myself. Am I so worried? Am I so anxious? Am I so distracted that I am being robbed of that which is necessary? Am I allowing myself to be consumed by worldly thoughts and things that are going to go away, by the way, things that are of little importance in the end, things that are going to disappear, things that seem so important right now, but the next day are just not important at all? Am I allowing those things to rob me from that which is necessary? And I hope that this short lesson about Jesus and his encounter with these faithful women would help you and encourage you to be mindful of these things and to think about and focus on that which is necessary. So let's conclude with the thought that we began with. There will always be something demanding our time. Always. Always. Every moment, every second, every day, every week, always. But our time with somebody is limited. This morning, if you have struggled with your relationship with Jesus and you have struggled to focus on those things which are necessary and you need the prayers of the congregation, that's available to you. Let us pray for you. Maybe you haven't even begun this journey. Maybe you have not been baptized into Jesus and started this journey of faith. If that is your desire, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.
While